Welcome back to part two of my Reclaiming Your Inner Child Magic theme. I was kind of pissed off because I had my Sorcerer Mickey hat to put on, and then I realized my stupid background kind of cuts it off, and it looks like I just have like this blue thing on my head. So maybe when I record part three, I'll lose the background and actually find a decent space in my house that I can record in. But until then, this is what you get. I will spare you my Disney music for today. Maybe I'll bring it back for another day. So if you are here from the part one, welcome back. Thank you for entrusting me with your time. Of course, I don't take that for granted at all. If you haven't watched part one, no worries either. This cannot stand alone on itself as well, because today we are talking about breaking the spell of those super old patterns that are no longer serving us, as well as talking about redesigning and reconnecting to our inner child and rewriting our stories. So, this isn't about just rebuilding our self-worth and reparenting ourselves. We are literally going to redesign and reconnect with the parts of ourselves that we've lost. So I just want to say thank you. If you've done the exercise in writing the love letter to your inner child, kudos to you. If you haven't, no worries. If you're here, that means that you are super brave. You are showing up and doing the work. And honestly, that's half the battle, because a lot of people are so happy to just stay stuck in those cycles and not even realizing it, because I know generations of my family were too. So this is where the real magic happens. So yesterday we unlocked your inner child. Today we are going to break those chains that held them captive. And since my title is Becky the Cycle Breaker, I am all about busting through chains and, doing things that are unexpected. Actually, one of my nicknames is the Disruptor. So let's go back and reflect on some of these wins that you've had, whether it's just getting through and watching things, whether you wrote the love letter to your little girl, little boy self. That's great. And it's powerful work. And I want to talk about the power of pattern breaking, and I will use myself as an example. I was stuck in a very serious negative pattern and I didn't realize it. Like I said, I had the degree, read the self-help books, but I realized very late in life that I was a fixer. And generally, the more effed up somebody was, the more I wanted to fix them, because I couldn't fix the issues within my own family. So not only did I have the role of fixer in my family, I had it in my friendship circles, in the men that I dated. And I thought that if I could finally figure out what the hell was wrong with everybody, if I could fix someone, then I would be worthy of love and attention. And I'm sure we all know how this story ends, or maybe this is a story that you're living yourself. And if you are, no judgment. Like I said, I did this for freaking decades. So at the end of all this, I didn't fix anyone, and it didn't matter if I did or I didn't. But what happened was that I ended up being exhausted, resentful, and completely lost. I actually call it my lost decade, because, I spent a lot of time, again, dating men who didn't deserve me, getting myself into situations that I had no business in being. Stop me if any of this sounds super familiar to you. But, I went through a lot of shit. And it wasn't until I figured out that, you know, yes, it was my story, but I come from a long line of people with a similar story, and I had to make a different choice. And when I was able to name it and realize what I was doing, that's when I was able to start the process of breaking free. And I will say that it took me a very long time to do so, because I was stubborn, didn't have any help, and, was kind of making it up as I go along. But what I was really doing was redesigning and reclaiming my own narrative. So I had to redesign my life in a way to set those boundaries, even when they felt impossible, and reclaim those parts of me that had been buried under everybody else's problems. I had stopped kind of existing and was existing in the service to others. Again, I'm sure this sounds familiar, and please let me know in the comments if it does. So let's talk about breaking these old patterns and why it matters. So patterns aren't anything more than coping mechanisms. You developed a pattern of behavior because as a child, that's what kept you safe. It kept you around those that you loved or who you wanted love from. I mean, they were really our form of protection, whether that's through people pleasing, perfectionism, avoidance. This was our inner child's way of surviving, and it worked for us. It obviously got us here to adulthood. But now this is what's keeping you trapped, because now you're stuck in these patterns and they're not letting you move past that point in which you started using them. So, likely, if you're watching this, you may struggle with being the fixer like I was, the peacekeeper, the invisible one, the overachiever. These are the roles that you identify with most and you might feel safe in, but they're also keeping you from living fully because they're not the roles that you are meant to have. So today we want to pull the curtain back on these patterns, not just to see them for what they are, but to start breaking them. Because knowledge is not power without application, as a mentor of mine once said. And being aware of the problems without taking any action is just a nice idea. I doubt that you're sitting here because you just want to get some feel good advice and not do anything about it. Because if not, you are wasting your time. And one of my biggest pet peeves, honestly, is wasting time. So that is not something that we want to do. And I will tell you that generally, when you get to the point where you've now realized that these things are a problem and you're ready to move forward, everybody kind of has that straw that breaks the camel's back, right? Whatever cliche you want to use. And for me, it was the moment where I had a conversation with my father for the millionth and one time, and we were arguing. And I was trying to explain to him, again, I was trying to set a boundary, not a request, because there is a difference. Previously, I had requested that he not come to my house having smoked a cigarette because the secondhand smoke was dangerous for my child who has a rare disease and a lung condition. The boundary that I then enforced was, if you do so, I'm not opening the door and you're not coming in my house. There's a difference between a request and a boundary. A request is when you ask somebody to do something and then there's no follow through. A boundary is where you put that in place, and if they don't kind of play by your rules, obviously there's going to be a consequence to their action. And so we were having this conversation, and we're going back and forth. I remember him telling me, "Oh, you're going to have your kids live in this bubble." And I said, "Well, I can't control, what everybody else does, but I can control what happens in my home, obviously, and the places that I take my children." And there was some back and forth. And I remember literally telling him to go to hell and throwing the phone across the room. And that was not the aha moment, though. The aha moment for me was my then 3-year-old daughter was watching, and she saw me like tell my father to go to hell and throw the phone across the room. And she didn't understand what was happening. She knew that mommy was upset and she was scared, and the look on her face mirrored what I'm sure I felt like inside. It was fear, it was horror, it was disbelief, and it was like that, what the fuck is going on, right? And it was in that moment that I realized that I was perpetuating that cycle, right? If I didn't stop doing the things that I was doing and engaging in this dance that I was in with my father, my children were going to grow up. Maybe I wouldn't be that type of parent, but they would grow up seeing me as the parent who took that shit from her parents, and they would probably think that that was okay. And that's when I had to make a very serious decision to literally break that spell. Like, I was done with it. And I don't know what that is in your life, that pattern, that cycle that you keep going through without changing it. And I know because I knew that at that moment I knew. And maybe you haven't gotten to that point where you've said enough is enough. Or maybe you have and you just haven't felt like you had the support to set those boundaries and to, kind of lay down the law in your own life, right? And that is okay. No judgment here whatsoever. And I didn't do this until I was 35 years old. And there are plenty of people who never do it. Because again, I come from a long line of people who never did it before me. But again, you've now realized it, and now it's time to do something about it. So to do that, we're going to redesign and we're going to rebuild. So we're breaking through that old narrative and creating a new narrative so that you can finally move past this and get to the point where you're rewriting, your new life, the life you were meant to live. And I have a couple exercises that might help with this, because I don't believe in just spewing a bunch of shit out there and not giving you anything to kind of deal with this. And again, I think it depends on what works for you, what type of learning or how you visualize or what you just feel comfortable doing with. It doesn't really matter. So one thing I wanted to talk about is the pattern burn ritual. This one is super easy to do. And again, it's tactile and tangible, and you can actually see the points that you're doing when you're doing it. I've done this myself. I haven't literally burned the paper, but tore it up into shreds, and that'll make sense in a minute. So here we are physically releasing an old pattern through a very simple yet powerful method. So you want to grab a piece of paper again, I'm big on writing. So you have your paper, you have your pen, and you're going to write. So now we want to call out those old patterns that have been running the show, and we're going to release them. So I want you to take that piece of paper and write down any pattern that's been keeping you stuck, and be as specific as possible. So it could be, when I feel angry, I often lash out and then I feel guilty afterwards. Or when I feel lonely, I overcommit to doing things that I don't want to do, and then I end up feeling resentful and exhausted. That is me, and I'm totally guilty. So again, any pattern that you find yourself repeating in your life, being as specific as possible. And then take that piece of paper and burn it if it's safe to do so, but depending on where you're at and stuff, that may not be feasible. But rip up the paper into little shreds, flush them down the toilet. Either you're watching it turn to ash or you're watching it rip to shreds. And that act is very symbolic and important in doing what you're doing, because you're taking that pattern and you are literally physically destroying it. And that's the power in letting things go. And it's giving you a tangible way to do these things. So now that we've kind of shifted all the old crap out, it's important to put these new truths into place so that the old patterns don't come back, right? So on a new piece of paper, you need to write what you want to live by instead. So for example, your time and energy are sacred. I have the right to say no. No is a complete sentence, by the way. And again, you'll have your sheet of paper with all your new truths on it. Put them on stickies, keep them around the house. You want to keep this somewhere where it's visible, that you can reread it and repeat it to yourself so that those old patterns don't come back in. We're going to anchor these new truths. I did this for myself and I'm still doing it actually, because I have a huge tendency to overcommit myself. So I have to remind myself, like, hey, I'm one person. I can do this one thing, and no is a complete sentence. And I don't need to over explain, because generally when you come from toxic backgrounds, you find yourself having the need to over explain why you may have said no to a certain thing. So, do this as much as you need to, but realizing that my worth was not tied to how many commitments I had was life changing for me. And it allowed me to move things out of my life that no longer served me and weren't filling my bucket, filling my cup, whatever you want to call it. But that shift was freaking life changing, let me tell you. I kind of like to play this exercise with my children, and this is the truth or trash game. And I'm sure you've heard of it. But this is how we're going to separate limiting beliefs in a playful but very impactful way. And I do this with my kids a lot in the car ride to and from school. And, there's always some little asshole at school who may say something to one of them, like, oh, you're some adjective, fill in the blank. And I turn around and ask them, I'm like, is that true? And then they kind of look at me like, what? I'm like, is it true? And they're like, no, of course it's not true. I'm like, okay, well, throw it in the trash. You don't need to hold on to anyone else's descriptions of you that don't resonate. Actually, you shouldn't at all. And you should really only hold on to the descriptions of yourself that resonate with you and that are actually true. So read out some common beliefs that you have about yourself, or maybe that others have said about you. And then I really want you to sit there and think about whether it's trash or the truth. Some examples of that is, I have to make everyone happy to be loved. Trash. My needs matter just as much as everyone else's. Yeah, that's the damn truth. If I set boundaries, I'll be abandoned. That is trash, and it's not true, but it might take some work on that one. I am worthy of respect and love. Absolutely true. Everybody is worthy of respect and love. And go through this as much as you need to. And everybody's statements are going to be different, and it just might be something that you need to visualize. If somebody says something negative about you, if somebody says, excuse me, you're this horrible selfish person for not overcommitting to something they want you to do, you may have the desire to internalize that statement, but then literally visualize yourself crumpling up that statement, 3-pointer into the wastebasket, dude. It's not true. And I think that's really, really powerful. Even practice your layup shots. Again, I'm not a basketball person, but just repeating some of the things that I've heard. So, something that I want you to go back and reflect on is notice how easy or hard it was to call out the trash, right? And the truth is, many of us have been living by these trashy ass beliefs for way too long. And it's time to take out the trash, call them out for what they are, and keep it moving. So, this one is a kind of my guilty practice, and I'll tell you why in a second. But this is what I call the armor up practice. So, this is kind of a concrete visualization to kind of practice when you find those old patterns creeping up, right? So, I want you, and this is, you don't need any paper, pen, or any, this is like pure visualization. So, close your eyes and picture yourself into a situation where your old pattern usually kicks in, whether it's with that annoying friend, relative that kind of brings out the worst in you. Maybe it's a family gathering, a tough conversation, or maybe when you're just alone with yourself, beating yourself up. So, what you need to do is to put something on so that you feel safe and strong in that situation. Maybe it's a shield, maybe it's a Superman cape, maybe it's your boundary boots. I don't know, cowboy boots that make you feel badass. Visualize yourself putting that thing on and then see how you feel. Now, it really has to be a powerful thing. I mean, if you have like a favorite sweatshirt that you feel like a total boss in, or, your, I don't know, your ass kicking shoes, whatever it is, like it needs to have that really powerful oomph to it, right? Armor up in that. And then the next time you feel yourself falling into that old pattern, visualize this armor. Like literally physically touch something on your person, whether it's your watch, your bracelet, your heart, and remind yourself and anchor yourself to that armor because you are strong and this time you're choosing differently. So, my example is, look, I'm a huge Robert Downey Jr. fan. I love Iron Man. If they ever remake Iron Man and put another Iron Man in it, I'm going to be very, very upset and highly pissed off, and I will protest in watching it. So, my suit of armor is literally the Iron Man suit. If I know I'm walking into a situation where I may be triggered or challenged or just might be tough, I will sit down and literally visualize myself like armoring up in the Iron Man suit. And if you've seen the movie, if Gwyneth Paltrow can wear the Iron Man suit, then us women can wear the Iron Man suit too. So, and that's my thing. And then I will literally repeat to myself that I'm a badass bitch. Again, whatever works for you. But I put my Iron Man suit on and I'm freaking ready to go do battle. So I think that's a very powerful visualization. And it's something physical where if you tie it to something on your person or just putting your hands over your heart and giving yourself that space and that reminder, super, super important. So hopefully you have walked away with feeling a release, whether you did the pattern burn ritual, whether it was shifting your perspective, doing the truth or trash game, and again, having that practical tool with the armoring up suit. So I just want to end this with a reflection. After this, I want you to ask yourself, or after you've had some time to kind of think about these tools that I've given you, what is one small way that you can honor your truth tomorrow? Doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real, and it has to be something that you can actually do and put into practice. Don't set yourself up for failure. When I first started breaking the spell and telling my truth, it was like, let me just get through this one part of my story without breaking down. And that was a small thing. And that was me telling my truth. Or let me make it through the day without being okay being the villain in somebody else's story. All of the shifts that happen in our lives, like looking back on it now, I realize the huge amount of change that has occurred for me, in the past 10 years. Did it seem like that on day one? Hell no. But looking back and seeing what I've accomplished, it's a lot of shit. And give yourself the grace because all these little things will add up to the big thing at the end of the day. So we've now spent 2 days or 2 sessions, right? Clearing out all the old, the yuck, whatever. So our part 3 of this series is we're going to build something new, something real, lasting, and filled with possibility. So you definitely don't want to miss this. I hope I see you in part 3. And again, put it in the comments, replay, whatever it is, and let me know, how you feel about these exercises so far and whether they've had any value to you. Because at the end of the day, that's really what matters, is making sure that this is valuable, sustainable, and something that you can actually put into practice. So I will see you then.